I have the kind of job most people fantasize about. I play video games for a living. To be more specific, I test them out before their release date to give my professional and honest opinion. I spot flaws that can make the teams building these massively expansive worlds look sloppy. I know how to code after years in college, and I also have an eagle eye for glitches. These skills, combined with luck, accumulated with knowing the right people, got me the gig. Most of the time, especially in recent years, I would do my job from home. One Monday morning around 11 a.m., I received an envelope on my doorstep. I opened it and found an address 400 miles away. The letter was signed and dated by an executive. He's a professional and legendary developer whose name you are likely to know if you are anything above a casual gamer. We will pay for your room upon landing and any additional travel expenses, it was written. This sort of project requires in-studio focus. I found this weird but not unheard of. The notion of leaving my residence was a daunting and even stressful one. I flipped to the next page and saw the contract. It would pay $30,000 for 16 hours worth of work. I was in absolute disbelief and searched the address on Google to make sure it was a real place. I found the gaming headquarters nestled on a hilltop near a hospital and a shopping plaza. I called the number on the bottom and stated that I could be there in 3 days. When I arrived at the building, my Uber driver drove towards the gated front entrance. I stepped out and pressed a button in the center of the metal barred wall as my ride departed.
Who is this?
The voice on the other end sounded as though they were irritated. I gave them my identity and retrieved the letter from my pocket. For a second, I had a dawning fear that perhaps this whole thing was an elaborate hoax, that the opportunity was simply a prank from someone in my past. The amount of money offered should have been an indicator that this was too fantastical to be based in fact. The gate swung open. As I walked past rows of shrubbery, the scent of lilac was strong in the air. A man in a suit came out and greeted me with a firm handshake.
Right this way,
he said as he led me into the main foyer. The lobby had a secretary, 2 security guards, multiple plants and aquariums lining the walls. Are you the director's assistant or bodyguard? I asked.
I'm a lawyer,
He said.
My name is Sam Hall. I represent this place whenever they release a new title.
He brought me to a conference room with a window that overlooked the rolling desert hills outside. From this mountainous viewpoint, everything seemed peaceful. The office had posters of past iconic video games on the walls.
Feel free to take a seat,
he said. I did so and watched him pull out a stack of papers held together with paper clips that looked like they're ready to snap. He slid it towards me. What is this? I asked.
First 5 pages are non-disclosure agreements. I'm sure you've seen those before, but to cover my bases, I have to explain. You will not, under any circumstances, leak anything about this game on social media. You won't even tell your significant other or family about it if they ask. If your review is positive or negative, you will be allowed to publish an in-depth opinion on the game as we near its official debut. Said review must be submitted to us for approval before publication. Are we clear?
All right, I said as I leafed through the stack. What are these remaining pages?
A survey. You'll fill it out today, assuming you're still on board with helping us out, of course.
I nodded as he handed me a golden pen. I read through it all and found most of the parts demanding silence online to be understandable. Once I got to the segment with questions and answers, I was a bit startled. The first few were normal, inquiring as to whether or not I was prone to epileptic seizures. I checked the word no. The next paragraph stated in no uncertain terms that playing in this particular world could induce nervous breakdowns. I had to stifle laughter as I agreed to those terms and conditions. I did not know how extensive the remainder of the survey would be. It asked me everything to how impulsive I was to the duration of my romantic relationships. What does this have to do with testing out a video game? I asked as I looked around. Is how I fill this out confidential?
Naturally,
he said.
The result of your score will not leave the premises.
What am I being scored on? Some of these questions are personal.
Your eligibility to be a competent enough tester for this particular assignment,
he said with a sigh and an eye roll.
Please answer candidly. This is not about any sort of judgment which could impact your external life.
I nodded and did as he recommended, although I fantasized about stabbing him in the eye with a pen due to his smugness. After the paperwork was complete, he walked me into a wide-open room the size of an average gymnasium. He dropped the pages into a mail slot on the way. Glass tables were pushed against the barriers. There's a sweeping view of the plains from a thickly railed balcony where fresh air was filtered through.
Congratulations,
he said as a woman in a white coat entered the room with a briefcase in hand. She stepped in front of us and opened the luggage. A device similar to a VR headset or an Oculus Quest glinted against the black bedding. He pulled it out and handed it to me. He also gave me a butcher blade. "Whoa," I said. "What is this for? Is that real?"
Trust me when I say it's part of the experience,
he said.
Slip the glasses over your face. Let's boot this thing up.
The first level was well built, but not so innovative that it did not resemble designs I'd never seen before. It was a basement. A table was in the center with tools on its surface, some rusted and tinged with coppery stained tones. In the middle was a notebook. I walked my avatar towards the spiral journal and opened it. Ciphers, each one more confusing than the last, were on every page. My initial impressions of the graphics was how flawless they were. Insofar as their definition and resolution were so precisely that it resembled footage from a documentary more than it did anything cartoonish. The representation of light and dark felt as though it were ripped from body cam footage. I sat it down and walked up to the door, the only one in the chamber. A menu popped up at the bottom of my vision, which gave me an option of opening the mahogany accessway. I did so and found myself in a rose garden. In the middle of it was a makeshift pond. The walkways around the body of water were made of concrete and littered with crimson petals. I looked even closer at the water. So many red flowers floated on its surface that I did not notice the red inkiness beneath the blanket of blooms. I reasoned that it had to be blood. A trail of the vital fluid was visible from one of the edges, which led to a mossy embankment at the eastern part of the garden. I followed and found a man tied up and shirtless. His torso had several wounds and slashed pieces of flesh, which indicated someone had tortured him with a blade. He looked up at me. Someone had split the bag under his left eye open, and he was profusely bleeding from it. "Please," he said, "let me go." "Why?" I asked. "How much pain are you in?" Although I was speaking out loud, it was all I could think of since the game itself didn't give me any kind of dialogue options to choose from. I headed closer towards him. The words "speak" popped over his head in neon lettering. "All I want to do is be at home," he said with great sadness. He was dehydrated and emaciated. His thin and frail figure was only tempered with blood loss, since that was what covered his exposed ribcage. Tears streamed down his face and mixed with the blood around his neck, some of which was dried. I saw something displayed in the left-hand corner. It was a health bar I hadn't seen prior to that moment. I connected the dots and realized it was his. He's not an enemy, I thought. He's simply a lamb to the slaughter. He has no weapons and is in a considerable amount of torment, more than most of the population outside of war zones and hospitals will ever experience. The world went black. I peeled off the headset and looked for Sam. He stood in the corner and I noticed 4 individuals in white lab coats near the balcony. Each one had a clipboard they were scrawling notes in.
You can leave for your hotel room now,
the lawyer said. I barely got 5 minutes of game time. It was starting to get interesting. That first room, you guys need to work on making it more compelling. The players want to feel like they're thrust into the action right away.
There will be more tomorrow. We simply wanted to monitor your initial reaction. Get some rest and meet us here at 9 a.m.
I arrived early the next day after 10 hours of sleep. The same crew was there. The lights in the building were flipped on by custodians, and rays of sunlight streamed through the casement as sounds of birds chirping snuck in. Why are the staff dressed as medical personnel? I asked. Don't they know I won't go into convulsions?
No need to worry about anyone else's job but your own,
Sam said as he handed me the headset and knife. I slipped it on and found myself in the rose garden again. The same man was tied up, and he wept as I approached him once more. 2 options were shown in bold writing next to where he groveled. The first row of interactive lettering asked me if I wanted to let him go. I could release his bindings, point him in the general direction of property, and allow him to disappear completely. The next and only alternative was to kill him. I chose the latter. I didn't want to risk the main character going to prison. Whatever simulator this was, I had a feeling that spending time in San Quentin was not part of it. I dug the knife into his chest. For VR, the impact the sharp instrument made in his skin and bone had a rough, tactile brunt as it punctured his heart. The noise was sickly as I withdrew the weapon and watched a small waterfall of fire fall down and spray my digital protagonist. He pled with me to show mercy. I gave him none when I went for another incision, this time behind his neck, after he slumped forward. The metal got jammed into the bone again. only this time it had to be his spine. The man's health bar depleted, once green, now red. More options were given. The game asked me if I would like to A, dissect the body, or B, bury him around the outskirts of the property in a plot near the garden. I went with the first and grisliest choice. I split him open down the middle once his gargling and breathing had stopped. I removed several of his organs and threw them into the water as though they were compost. I was performing these surgical maneuvers and felt warm fluids splash on my arms and stomach. I later found out the crew had splattered me with fake blood to make the experience more sensory. I was briefly unsure of how they were planning to emulate these conditions so the average buyer could experience them, but I focused on the task at hand until every part of the body was amputated and his interior was hollow. I had adrenaline coursing through me, and everything about the task was violent and barbarous, but somehow satisfying. It reminded me of killing civilians in the older Grand Theft Auto games, but it was more intimate and realistic. I dug the tip of the blade into the cadaver's throat, and I started to see, and that was when the whole world went black. I was back in actual reality. All the programmers or researchers or fake doctors or whatever they are stared at me with a combination of curiosity and fear. Terror suddenly filled me. I was scared they would see the kind of pleasure I took in it all. Somehow this was not appropriate to them. I wondered if I was going to get kicked out of the project, and the combination of dread towards the prospect of losing money and perhaps never being able to do this again gave me a sense of objective mortification.
How did you find the experience overall?
Sam asked. I found it. I could not explain how much of an endorphin rush it gave me. The freedom of its brutality was only rivaled by first-person shooters I could remember playing when I was little.
You loved it, didn't you?
I nodded, unable to hide my enthusiasm.
Well,
He continued.
you are the best test subject. This game is called Serial Killer, after all. It's mainly meant for people who can't control their impulses to torture and murder, to provide an outlet to those who would consider committing such acts in real life. You scored the highest out of anybody in our psychopathy checklist.
What's up, guys? It's time for the end of the video where I talk and thank the author and all the other people and give credit where credit's due. Thank you, Colt Leisure, for allowing me to narrate one of your stories. Guys, they have so many more stories that I can narrate. If you enjoy this, Colt, just let me know, and I'll happily there'll be a nice long playlist just with your name on it. And Yenx, thank you so much for being a part of this, dude. Your voice definitely made it so, thanks for doing some of the work, bud. I honestly think that's what it is. I'm having a super fun time doing all these collabs here lately. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for making it this far in the video. Check out all the links in the description to the author's website, the author's coffee. Go ahead and check out Yen's page. Tons of narrations. An amazing narrator, as you heard here. So please go check it out. All right, guys. Have a great day. See you next week. Bye.